Hi everyone. Um, Allow me to introduce myself. I am Shouzheng, the technical sales for ANDAMAN Medical. Welcome to today's presentation webinar. Today, I'm going to give you an overview of the key regulatory changes we are expecting for the year 2021 across 6 of the major ASEAN markets, which are Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. As the time for this presentation is short, so we won't be holding a Q&A session today, but if you have any queries at the end of this presentation, please drop us an email at contact@andamanmed.com. Before we go to the topic about the major regulatory changes in 2021, so I would like to brief you all about the regulatory framework in the ASEAN countries. Now, the Association of the Southeast ASEAN Nations, which is abbreviated as ASEAN, comprises of 10 member countries, which combine population of over 620 million people. So those 10 member countries, which include Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Brunei, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. So for the next 30 years, the ASEAN market of these 10 countries is projected to have the 4th largest economy in the world. And for the last 5 years, all these 10 member countries, they actually came together to sign a ASEAN Medical Device Directive, also abbreviated as AMDD, to harmonize the medical device regulations. And this AMDD is actually giving the manufacturers from different regions have a more synchronized and a straightforward pathway to market their medical device in the ASEAN region. So the AMDD introduced an ASEAN Common Submission Dossier template, which might be applicable to use in all the countries within the ASEAN region. And also by introduce AMDD, it will reducing the cost for the companies seeking device approvals. The introduction of AMDD also using a risk-based classification for the medical devices. So the medical devices can be divided into 4 types of risk classes, which is Class A indicates the lowest class, and Class D indicates the highest risk. And right now we are talking about the implementation of the AMDD status in these ASEAN countries. So for the AMDD implementation, in 3 of the countries, is actually their implementation of the AMDD is already been fully compliant or almost compliant with the AMDD. So these countries, which include Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia. The registration process in this country is quite straightforward, and the classification of the medical devices in these countries is similar to one another, so it has an easier classification process. But when we look into the Vietnamese market, the AMDD is not yet fully implemented, but only implemented for a Class A medical devices. So the industry is expecting the Vietnam market to actually fully implement the AMDD towards the end of 2021. For Philippines right now, since 13th of March 2020, the Philippines FDA is actually introducing phase 0 of the medical device registration. So for the phase 0, it has indicates that for all Class A medical devices, it shall undergo a Certificate of Medical Device Notification, also called a CMDN. If your medical devices falls under Class B, Class C, and Class D, and it is listed in the Annex A of the Administrative Order 2020-001, then it shall undergo the Certificate of Medical Device Registration, or called the CMDR. Meanwhile, in Thailand, the government has partially implemented the national regulations according to the AMDD. So they have those draft guidelines such as the good distribution practice for medical devices in place, but it's not yet fully implemented, not like Singapore or Malaysia. So now we are on to our topic, which is the expected regulatory changes in 2021 and beyond. So if we look at these 2 markets, Singapore and Indonesia. For Singapore and Indonesia, there's not much regulatory changes envisaged for the next year or so, because as we know, the AMDD has been fully implemented or almost implemented in these countries. However, for countries like Malaysia, we are expecting the industry to release a few guidelines in the year 2021 and beyond. So one of the guidelines that is going to release by the Medical Device Authority in Malaysia is the renewal of the registered medical device. So as we know, in Malaysia right now, all the medical devices are expecting to undergo a re-registration process. So it is not same like those retention fee scheme was implemented by the Health Sciences Authority in Singapore. So in Malaysia, when the medical device registration certificate, the validity has expired, the medical device is going to undergo a re-registration process instead. And about 2 months ago or 3 months ago, the Malaysian government, the Medical Device Authority, actually released a guideline called the Medical Device Advertising Regulation. So basically all medical device manufacturers or the local establishments, whether they are a license holder, importer, or distributor, they must actually register their medical device and then submit a notification to the authority to obtain the advertising notification if they wish to advertise their medical device on social media such as Facebook. So if MDA actually have released a circular letter stating a transitional period of the medical device for 18 months. So the transitional period is about from until end of 31st of December 2021. But after that, all the medical device establishments are expected to fully comply with this regulation. So you can find this regulation on the government's website. And the authority are also expecting to release a few guidelines such as general duties of the establishments, the designated medical device permit guidelines, as well as the compounding of offenses of the regulation. Meanwhile, in countries like Thailand, so as you know, the medical device registration classification in Thailand is a bit different from those in other markets like Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, because right now, the medical device classification in Thailand is actually using a policy-based classification where the medical devices are divided into 3 types, which is a class 1 or a licensed medical device indicates a highest risk. So such medical device like contact lenses falls in this category. If your medical device is a physical therapy product, so it will fall under class 2 or a notified medical device in Thailand. However, about 80 to 90% of the medical devices actually falls under the general medical devices category in Thailand. So the approval timeline for general medical device in Thailand is about 1 to 2 weeks. But the classification is expected to change in the first quarter or the second quarter of 2021. So in the future, the Thai FDA, they will release a risk-based classification of the medical devices, which is synchronized with the ASEAN Medical Device Directive. So the classification will be divided into class 1, class 2, 3, and 4. Next, we are talking about the market for Vietnam. So right now, the Vietnamese regulation is a bit complex. So the medical device approval license in Vietnam can be divided into 2. So the first will be called product license and the second one will be called import license. If your medical devices falls under the category of the import license, so there are 49 groups of the medical devices falls under the category of import license, and you wish to import before 31st of December 2021, you have to apply the import license from the authority. But we are talking now is the product license. So for product license, if you classify it as a class A medical device in Vietnam, you already can apply for the product license. But if your medical devices falls under the category of class B, class C, and class D, you can submit the medical device dossier for the product license to the Ministry of Health, but the approvals won't be granted until 1st of January 2022. So because previously they have mentioned that the approval will be started to granted in the 1st of January 2022, but because of there's a lot of medical device dossiers submitted to the authority, so the industry are expecting the approval registration is extended until end of 2022. However, note again, this is based on our evaluation of the current situation, and the Ministry of Health in Vietnam has not released any advisory about this. The last market that we're going to focus on will be Philippines. Now, Philippines is a quite complex market, but it's changing. So we're going to talk about the first one, which is the medical devices in Philippines. For medical devices in Philippines, as you know, for Class B, Class C, Class D medical devices that is listed in the Administrative Order 2020 Annex A, it can already be registered with the authority by getting a CMDR. Those medical devices that are not listed in the Administrative Order 2020 Annex A, we are expecting the phase 1 will be implemented in January 2021. So basically, all these medical devices that is not listed, Class B, Class C, and Class D, will obtain a CMDN from the authority, and the validity is about 2 years. After that, the medical device will undergo a CMDR, which is under phase 2. So this is for general medical device. And note that the notification requires a fewer technical documentation for registration. Now we are moving on to another type, which is the in vitro diagnostic medical devices. So when we are expecting the Philippines FDA to release the new administrative order in January 2021. So in the new administrative order, it will actually listed those medical devices that requires registration. Because right now, for IVD in Philippines, we know that for IVD medical devices, it can be divided into 2 types, which is a registrable IVD, and then it will be a non-registrable IVD. So they will release a list of IVD that must be registered, and we are expecting them to publish in January 2021. Now the list which include the COVID-19 test kits product. So in this notification, in this administrative order, we are expecting the Philippines FDA to have mentioned that the notification of a Class A, B, C, D medical device will be applicable starting from January 2022 with a 2 to 5 years validity, whereas the registration after the notification has been ceased. So the registration for the IVD for Class B, C, and D is expected to be applicable from the January 2024. So the reason there is no registration for a Class A IVD because in Philippines, all Class A medical devices, whether it's general medical device, it will just undergo a CMDN, which is a Certificate of Medical Device Notification from the Philippines FDA. So just a big summary on what we have talked before I just talk about our services. So we can see that in 6 of the major Southeast ASEAN countries, 3 of the countries already almost complied with the AMDD, which is Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia. But countries like Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, the regulation is constantly changing. So in order for you to get up to date with this regulation, you will need a local partner which can provide you such information. And ANDAMAN Medical is a medical device consulting firm that assists manufacturers from all over the world to register their medical devices in the Southeast ASEAN region. So we have local staff and office in 6 countries, which include Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia. Our role is unique when you compare it to registering your medical device with a local distributor is that we are actually giving you an independence and real flexibility of your market access. So some manufacturer, let's say a manufacturer in Europe, they found a distributor in Indonesia and they registered their medical devices with the distributor in Indonesia. So when there's an issue arises between the manufacturer and the distributor, the manufacturer cannot pull themselves out of the situation, and they have to solve the issue with the distributor before they can proceed with distributing or importing the product. It makes them the sales progress in these countries in being affected. But if you acquire a license holder such as ANDAMAN Medical to register your medical devices, which means that you can actually appointing or terminating the distributor anytime through us. And in some countries, we also implement our importation and master distribution model. This is because a license holder in countries like Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, and if you require import license in Vietnam. So Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and if you require import license in Vietnam, the license holder such as ANDAMAN Medical, it requires an importation process. So our team in these countries is able to help you to get the custom clearance, and the product is eventually distributed to the end customer. So you can focus on your business. And we also offer our regulatory intelligence services, which can provide you a report on the market landscape and also a training. So since 2013, ANDAMAN Medical has registered about 1,000 medical products, and we have about 90 clients across all the regions. So some of the clients, we have a multinational company that engage our services, like companies like Parexel, Hitachi, and we have also local manufacturers in Japan that engage us, such as GLMDD, LNK from Korea, and manufacturers like Restorative Therapies and Versa from United States, and then manufacturers from Oceania, like Aurora Biosurgery, that engage our services. So if you need any consultations for the medical device registration or how we can help you to navigate on this market, just drop us an email at contact@andamanmed.com and we will get back to you. So this will be for today's presentation. If you have any question, just drop us an email. Thank you. Thank you for joining.